Hello guys, and welcome to the first thumbnail project in this course. Now the idea for this thumbnail is as follows. Currently, as of the time of this recording, there's an ongoing conflict going on between China and America, with President Trump and President Xi engaging in a trade war. Donald Trump has increased the tariff charges on China, and thus they're having a back and forth between the two countries. So what we're going to do is take that idea and we're going to create this thumbnail which you see on screen, which revolves around the trade war. Not to get political guys, I just like the idea of this thumbnail and I thought it was a really good concept to showcase this thumbnail style. Now with this thumbnail, the main objective is to teach you some advanced techniques on how to blend a scene together, and I'll also go over the subtle art of creating tension in a scene like this one. Now I encourage you guys to follow along with this tutorial, and I'll be providing you with all the images used in this thumbnail, and you can find that in the link within this course module. So with that being said, let's get straight into the video. So let's start off by creating a new file. So let's click on new file and let's set the dimensions to width 1920, height 1080, resolution set to 72. We'll keep the color mode to RGB color and 16 bits. We also want to have the background color initially set to 50% gray. So all you will need to do is simply click within this square right here and then just under the B tab, enter in 50, as you can see right here. Once you've done that, simply click OK and then click create. And as you can see, we are now starting off with a 50% gray canvas. Now the reason why I like to start off my thumbnails with a 50% gray canvas is because when I'm cutting out subjects and just masking subjects in general, any imperfections, they're very visible to see on this gray canvas, as opposed to a white canvas where you might miss some certain imperfections. With a gray canvas, any dark or light imperfections, 95% of the time, they're just more easier to spot on a grey canvas. Okay, so let's start off by masking and cutting out all of our subjects. So what I'm going to do is right here, I have the first image that we are going to cut out. Let's just bring this into our original document. Let's click yes. And now I'm just simply going to cut this out. And I'll keep this in, guys, because I want you to see the complete process of how I create these thumbnails. Okay, so let's just quickly just resize this, make this a bit smaller to something like this for now, and then I'm going to quickly turn this into a smart object. So right click and convert to smart object. So let's just click on one of the selection tools, click on the magic wand tool or the quick selection tool, any of the two, and let's just click on select subject. And as of late, select subject does a pretty good job of selecting subjects if there's a contrasty background and foreground element. Okay, so let's just see, let's click on the mask and let's see how much of a good job that's done. Pretty much perfect, guys. So there's no real need to do any other method. In this case, we've got a pretty good result. So let's just zoom in like so, and as you can see, there's only one little thing that we need to adjust, and that is the color of the hair. So as you can see, the background that was previously here, some of that is showing within the hair, and you can also see some slight imperfections, which again you can see very clearly because we have a gray background. Okay, so let's just remedy this. So I'm going to double click on our mask, and we can remove this blue very simply by just clicking on decontaminate colors like so. And as you can see, that removed all the blue light in the hair. Okay, so that's sorted, and now all we need to do is just work on this little imperfection we have right here. You can see there's a little white line, doesn't look good, so let's remove that. So let's just click on the brush tool right here, and then we can just click on the minus and then just simply start to paint this out. As you can see, does a pretty good job. Okay, that's done. Let's now go ahead and click OK, and now we have the first subject cut out. Pretty simple, it didn't take long at all. Okay, looking good. So what I'm going to do now, just rename this to Trump just to keep organized, and I'm also going to add this into a group. So let's press Command or Control G, and we are going to rename this group to backups, since we want to keep backups of every single element that we add within this thumbnail, just in case we make a mistake and we need to go back to it without any adjustments. Okay, so that's backups, and we are just going to simply now click on this layer and press Option or Alt and just drag another copy to the very top. Then we can go ahead and close this backups folder and hide it, and now we can focus on placing this within our canvas. So what I'll do is just right click and then convert into a smart object like so, and now let's just place this image. So what I'll do is I'll press Command or Control T, right click and flip horizontal because we want him to be pointing towards the right. Okay, and then we can go ahead and just decrease the size to something like this for now. We can come back to the size afterwards. At this stage, we're just trying to get everything into the general position it should be in. And now let's do the same thing for the Chinese president. So what I'll do is just drag this image into our document like so, click yes, and let's just zoom out a bit. Go ahead and right click and convert this into a smart object, and we can rename this to she just to keep organized once again. Let's now press Command or Control T, resize this so that it fits within the thumbnail bounds to something like this. Perfect. Let's just zoom in, and let's now go ahead and click on the quick selection tool and see if select subject does a good job. So let's click on select subject and let's see what this does. Yep, a pretty good job. Okay, so what we can do is just drag this more to the right, and of course we don't want this microphone to be within our image. So what I'm going to do is just simply go ahead and select the marquee tool right here and make a highlight of the bottom half of this image. This image is quite long vertically, so we don't actually need this whole image to be in the thumbnail, but the top half will suffice. So let's go ahead and press B for the brush tool. Make sure that you have the black color selected, have flow set to 100, and we can just simply, while simply having the mask selected, go ahead and just paint this out, as you can see right here. Then we can press Command or Control D to deselect, and then we can go ahead and just press Command or Control T, right click, flip horizontal, and then just rotate this to get a good angle of this subject. Yep, to something like this, and then we can just resize this to fit on screen. And once again, don't worry too much about the sizing. We're going to work on that in just a moment. I just simply want to place things on screen. Okay, let's just zoom into the subject, and maybe we could just refine this mask a little more. So let's just select within our mask. Let's press B for the brush tool, and let's just decrease the size of our brush. Let's make sure to have the color set to black, and let's just refine these edges, which look quite odd. So yeah, just with a small soft rounded brush, just refine these edges. Let's just zoom in. Yeah, maybe we could just refine these areas. Maybe we could use a hard brush, that would probably work better. A hardness set to 100%. Let's just hover over this. Yep, so we haven't done it perfectly here. So let's just quickly go over. Yep, and just refine this mask. So yep, here as well. So yeah, just pay attention to the details, guys, and there is no need to rush this step. Okay, so yeah, let's just zoom in here, get a bit of that off, and as you can see, I'm just refining my mask. We want this to look good in the end. Yep, perfect. Just remove that. Yep, this is looking pretty good to me. And while we're at it, let's just quickly go and hover over Donald Trump, and let's see if we've made any mistakes on this one, and see if we can refine anything at all. Yeah, maybe we can just go over with a brush and just remove those sort of stranded hairs. Yep, stuff like this we can just quickly fix. Yep, maybe we can remove some of this as well. Yep, looking pretty good. Yep, perfect. Okay, let's just zoom out, and as you can see, we have now cut out both of our subjects. Okay, now it's just about resizing these images. We want to get the sizing right. So first of all, I want the head sizes of both of the subjects to match, because I don't want one subject to overpower the other subject. So keeping things the same scale is really going to create a sense of equality, and that's really important in this thumbnail we're creating today. So what I'll do is, of course, as you can see, the head of Donald Trump is slightly smaller than she. So what we can do first of all is just get a ruler, press Command or Control R to bring out the rulers, and we can create a little guide somewhere around here. And now we can just focus on alignment first. So let's just bring Donald Trump up like so, and then let's just increase Donald Trump's head size until it matches relatively with the size of President Xi's head. So something like this is looking better. Yeah, we can even go ahead and take it further, create another ruler, and sort of take it to the neckline like so, and we can work with this. So maybe we can increase Donald Trump's head a little more to something like this. And you may need to eye this a bit. It's not going to be perfect just by the guides, but you want the head sizes to be the same. So something like this is looking pretty good. Okay, yeah, Perfect. Okay, so from here, now we can just move Donald Trump more to the left. I don't like how much of the space he's taking up. And let's now go ahead and create another guide to somewhere like here. And we want everything below this guide to be removed from this thumbnail. So what we can do is just click within the mask for she, and we can use the marquee tool using the guide, and we can just follow along that line. Select everything below that guide, and now with the mask selected, press B for the brush tool. We are going to paint this part out, as you can see right here. Let's do the same for the other side. So let's just bring up the marquee tool. Let's go ahead and select everything right here, and we can just remove this simply by selecting the mask. Press B for the brush tool, and with the black color selected, paint this out. Okay, from here, let's just quickly eye this. I think we could still increase the size of Donald Trump's head a slight more. Yeah, this is looking a little bit more accurate now. Okay, and then I think we can just select both of these images, press Command or Control T at the same time, and we can just press Alt and Shift at the same time to go ahead and just decrease the size of these subjects, just a slight touch. Now let's just hide these guides, press Command semicolon, and let's just quickly fix this right here. I'm just going to zoom in, press M for the marquee tool, the shortcut, and let's just remove this very quickly. Okay, that's looking really good. Let's have a look. Yeah, maybe we can move Donald Trump more to the left. Something like this. Yep, looking good. Let's just bring back our guides, and I'm going to just move this up here like so, and we can just quickly refine this even further. So just remove this lower part of Donald Trump. Okay, looking good. Okay, now I think I want to adjust the perspective of President Xi just to make him look as if he's facing towards Donald Trump a little bit more than he is right now. So what we can do is just click on Xi, and we are going to right click and convert to smart object, and let's just place a copy within our backups layer, since I don't think we've added in a backup for this president right here. Okay, yep, so we have Trump and Xi, that's perfect. And now I'm simply going to press Command or Control T, right click and click on perspective, and let's just shift this perspective a slight touch. So just adjust like so, just to make him look like he's facing Donald Trump a little bit more than he is right now. Okay, perfect. And then we can just increase the size of this subject a slight bit. Let's bring back our guides. Yeah, we can increase President Xi a little bit more like this. Okay, this is looking perfect now, guys. So I've adjusted the perspective as well, so this is looking really good. Let's now go ahead and hide our guides, and I think we are now in a good position to move on to the next step, which is to add in the cargo canisters. Okay guys, so now we want to add in the containers. So what I'm going to do is simply go ahead and cut out this one right here. So of course, this is the one with the most detail in this image, so we are going to be using this one. Now how I'm going to make a selection of this is simply by using the pen tool. So let's press P for the pen tool, and let's now just go ahead and start making our selection. So let's just go ahead and try and get a good selection. Zoom in a little bit more. Yep, and we are just going to go over these containers right here. Okay, as you can see. Now guys, I'm assuming that you guys know how to use the pen tool. If not, just go ahead and watch a quick tutorial on YouTube. It's all over the place. You can find many tutorials on YouTube of how to use this tool, but in this course I'm making the assumption that you know how to do this already. So we are just going to skip that learning phase. Okay, so let's just do this better. And of course we are going to refine this afterwards, so any imperfections, do not worry too much right now. Okay, this is looking pretty good. And we are going to continue on right here, down here, over here. Let's just bring this down a slight bit. You can simply hold down Control or Command and then click on your point to move it around. Okay, so let's continue. You get the gist of this, guys. Yep, looking good. And now let's just join everything together. Yep. Maybe we can undo that to something like this. Now let's just zoom out, and then let's just press Command or Control Enter to make a selection. Okay, now once we have our selection, let's click on mask like so. Now I'm just going to add a bit of feather to this, maybe to 1 pixel, so we don't have really sharp edges. This is looking pretty good. And now we can just drag this into our document like so. Click yes, and then we can just resize this to fit better. Okay, so I'm going to right click and convert this into a smart object. I'm going to rename this to containers. And then let's just make a copy. So hold down Alt and just drag it into backups in case we need a backup. Okay, now let's just transform, bring this to size, and now let's just go ahead and try and place this perfectly on screen. So we want this to sort of overlap with Donald Trump and President Xi. So we're going to have containers on each side. Yep, looking pretty good. And we can come back and adjust this afterwards. So don't overthink this step, guys. Yep. Something like this will do for now. Let's just go ahead and make a duplicate. So we are going to simply just hold Alt or Option and drag whilst holding Shift to make a duplicate. Then we can just transform, right click, and then flip this horizontal. Okay, like so. And then it's just a matter of placing this on screen to something like this. Okay, looking good. Yep. Perfect. Now once you've placed your containers, let's just make sure that the spacing between these containers is equal and that we've got things in the right position. So I just want to make sure that these are in the right position relative to the midpoint of this thumbnail. So let's go ahead and just bring back our guides, press Command or Control semicolon to do that. And let's just get rid of these guides. So go to View, go to guides, and let's just clear these guides. Okay, so now let's just drag a vertical guide from the left hand side and just place it in the middle. Now it should sort of just snap to the middle like so, which is at 960 pixels if you're wondering. And if you're unsure, you can simply just undo that, go ahead and select the rectangle tool, simply click on your canvas, and you can type in the dimensions of this thumbnail. So that would be 1920 by 1080, and then you can just simply drag this to fit on the canvas, press Command or Control T, and this right here would serve as the middle point in the thumbnail. And you could just drag a guide to that midpoint just to make sure that you're in the center. Okay, so let's just undo that, since we already know where the center is. So let's just drag our guide to the center, which is right here. And as you can see just from observation, if we zoom in, it looks as if there's a little bit more space on this side. So we can just bring this container more to the left. Just a slight bit, not too much. And if you really want to be nitpicky, guys, you can even go ahead and just get the rectangle tool, make a point right here, and then go ahead and just make sure that the spacing matches. Okay, so we actually can go back a little bit. Now the spacing between these two containers is equal relative to the midpoint of this thumbnail. Okay, now let's focus on adding in the background. So we have a sky as the background, and I want to create a night scene for this thumbnail. Now having a night scene is intentional. We want to create a bit more of a serious vibe to this thumbnail. It wouldn't look right if these two were facing off in the bright blue summer sky. So we need to make sure that all the elements are working cohesively together to communicate a single message within the thumbnail. Since this is quite a serious topic, it doesn't make sense to have very vibrant, bright colors. So we're going to follow along that line of seriousness by just adding a lot more darker tones into this thumbnail. Okay, so here we have the sky. I'm going to just drag this into our canvas like so, and I'm going to just rename this to sky. Okay, now let's just go ahead and do what we've always done and hold down Alt or Option and just drag this into our backups folder. We want to do this for every single element we add in. Okay, now we can just go ahead and just transform and just adjust this, but before that let's just actually convert this into a smart object, and now we can transform and just play around with this sky. Okay, now let me just place this behind all of our elements like so. Yep, looking good. And we want the scene to be quite dark, so we are going to transform. Maybe we can flip this around like so. Yep, looking much better already. And we can just increase the size of this. Wow, looking much better. I'm really liking how this looks, guys. Maybe we can increase the size even further just to get a little bit more of the darker tones within this thumbnail. Yep, I think this looks really good. So right now, guys, we're just focusing on adding in all of our elements into this thumbnail, and then we'll focus on blending afterwards. So let's continue on. Now let's focus on adding in the flags into this thumbnail. So of course, we're going to have the American flag behind Donald Trump, and I'm going to have the Chinese flag behind President Xi. Of course, since both of these countries are engaging in a trade war, it would be a good idea to add in the flags representing both countries, and this is just going to help in communicating the message of this thumbnail. So let's go ahead and start off by adding in the American flag. I am simply just going to drag this into our canvas like so. Yep, and then we can just drag this underneath all of our elements, but not the sky, of course. Okay, then we can just go ahead and also rename this to American flag. And we can also do the same thing that we've always done, guys. Just hold down Alt or Option and just drag one into the backups folder. Let's also convert this into a smart object. So right click and convert to smart object. And then let's just transform and bring this down to the correct size. So let's just decrease the size of this flag. Zoom in a bit. And we want to place this behind the subject, and we don't want this to take up too much space within the thumbnail, but we definitely want it to be present. So what I'm going to do is take it up to something like right here, so that we can see the flag in general without overdoing it with how much space it's taking up in this thumbnail. Okay, so I think something like this is pretty good. Yep. And what I'm going to do, guys, is just bring back the ruler, so Command or Control R, and I just want to drag a point to somewhere like here, as you can see. So we are following this line right here if you just zoom in, and we can also do the same for this one as well. Now the reason why I added those guides is I'm now going to soften the edges of this flag until it reaches this area right here in line with this guide that we've just created, and then I'll do the same thing for the right hand side. So what I'm going to do now is just make sure to select the American flag. Let's create a mask like so, and then press B for the brush tool. Make sure you have the black color selected, and let's just bring our flow down to something like 50%. Also make sure to have a soft brush, and then it's just a matter of just slightly painting out until you reach the guide. As you can see, it's fairly simple. We can also maybe get some of the bottom parts. Yep. And we sort of just want to keep softening the edges until it hits the guide. Yep, to something like this. Maybe we can do the upper area. Yep. Yep, something like this should do for now. Let's just zoom out. Yeah, maybe we can bring this top part back. So let's just use the inverse color to bring back any parts of our selection. And then let's just redo this again. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, yeah, and we can refine this as much as we want. Right now, we are just focusing on adding in all of our elements into this thumbnail. Okay, now let's just do the same thing for the Chinese flag. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag this into our canvas like so. Perfect. Yep. And then we can just do the same thing. So rename this to Chinese flag. We can just place a copy within our backups folder. Let's then go ahead and right click and convert it into a smart object. transform, and then we can just bring this down to size. So let's just go ahead and do that, scale it down. Yep, and we want these stars to be visible because obviously with this flag, if you don't have those stars visible, then you wouldn't be able to tell it's a Chinese flag. As there are many red flags in the world, this is not the only red flag which represents a country. So let's just keep that in mind when scaling this down. Looking pretty good. Let's bring our guides back. So Command or Control semicolon to do that. And let's just make sure that we move these stars into position so that when we go ahead and feather, we are not feathering out these stars. Now we can go ahead and just press mask like so to create a layer mask and do the exact same thing we did for the American flag. So make sure you have the black color selected and have a soft brush with 50% flow. Let's just paint some of this out. As you can see, it's fairly simple, guys. Looking really good. Okay, let's just keep it to something like this for now. Okay guys, by now you should be able to start spotting a theme, and that is that we are trying to keep things balanced on both sides. So as you can see, we have 3 elements on this side and 3 elements on the other side. Everything is balanced, and the only real thing that is different is that Donald Trump is pointing towards President Xi, and that's completely fine. This pose that Donald Trump is doing right now really helps to build the tension and just communicate a more serious message. So what I want to do now, guys, is I actually just want to adjust the perspective of both of these flags. So let's start off with the American flag. So have it selected. Let's press Command or Control T, right click and click on perspective like so. Now we are going to just hold down Shift and drag this point down from here, and we'll do the same over here like so. Yep. Just so that we follow a little bit of an angle. Okay, let's press enter. For now, just do the same thing for the Chinese flag. Press Command or Control T, right click, perspective, and then holding down Shift, just bring this bottom point up like so to something like this. Then we can press enter and just go ahead and increase the size of this. Yep, like so. Yeah, looking really good. Yep, to something like this. And we can do the same thing on this side, just increase the size a slight bit. Okay, so just a bit of perspective added to these flags. Then let's go ahead and just bring back our guide. So Command or Control semicolon, and then we can just do the same thing. Just get our brush tool and we can just start masking out these parts right here. So do it here and do the same thing for all this excess right here. Okay, starting to look really good, guys. Yep, looking really nice. Now the reason why I'm adding in some perspective into this thumbnail is because I want to avoid making things look too flat. Since this is an advanced tutorial, I want to show you guys how you can create depth within your thumbnails, and this is an example of that. So we're going to continue on, and I'm going to show you right now how you can even take the illusion of depth even further. So what we're going to do first of all is I'm going to actually start to just fade out some parts of the bottoms of these canisters, and by doing that we're going to create the illusion of depth even more. So let's start off by just clicking on our containers, and let's just add a layer mask to both of our containers. Simply click right here to add a layer mask. Okay, once you've done that, let's just go back to container 1, which I believe is this one. Yep, so the one on the left. Maybe we can actually make this a little more clear by just typing in left and do right for this one right here, just to make things easier for us moving forward. Okay, and what we are going to do now is I'm just going to use the gradient tool. So select the gradient tool, and we want to have a black to transparent gradient. Now you should be able to find this preset pretty easily, especially if you click on this arrow. It's a standard Photoshop preset, but if for whatever reason you can't find it, simply click on any gradient, go ahead and just drag on your canvas like so, and you will now have a gradient option pop up. Then you can go ahead and just adjust the sliders to get the exact same result in the end. And so what you have right here, the top bar controls the colors, and this bottom bar right here which says opacity controls, this is what's going to control the transparency. So of course we have a black to white. We want the white to be invisible in this case, since we wanted a black to transparent gradient. So all we need to do is just adjust the opacity of this white section. So we need to go ahead and just click on this one right here, because this is in line with the white, and then we can just decrease the opacity down to 0, and we now have this preset ready to use. As you can see, we now have a preset of black to transparent. I hope that helps you guys understand. Okay, so let's just remove this, and now let's just click within our layer mask of the first container on the left, and we are simply now just going to make a point and drag up whilst holding shift to just fade out the bottom of these containers. Maybe something like this. Okay, looking really good. And now we can just simply duplicate this layer mask for this container on the right, simply by just clicking within the layer mask, holding option and dragging into the container on the right. And now it will say replace layer mask, in which case we will click yes. And now as you can see, it's been copied to this side as well. And now toggling between the before and after, you can see how we've blended in these containers into the scene a lot more, and we've created the illusion of depth. So this is before and this is after. It looks much better to me, and I'm sure you guys will agree. Now I want to add in some flags from both countries on these containers. So on the left hand side, we're going to add some American flags, and we'll do the same thing for the right hand side. We're going to add in some Chinese flags, and the reason for this is just to simply add in some extra context for anyone viewing this thumbnail. Remember, people don't actually look at thumbnails for too long, and so you only have a couple of seconds to really grasp their attention. So giving as much context in those few seconds as possible is the best way to go. This is why we are adding in those flags. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's bring in our American flag into our canvas like so. Let's click yes. Let's go ahead and right click and convert this into a smart object, and then rename this to American flag container. Okay, and make sure that this layer is above the container layers, since we want to overlay these flags on top of the containers. So let's now go ahead and just scale this down. Yep, like this. Just scale it down. And let's focus first on adding in this flag onto the top blue container right here on the left hand side. So we are going to zoom in and use this corner of the container as our reference guide as to how large we want this flag to be. So we are going to scale it until it reaches the dimensions of the corner of this container. Okay, so once you have it like this, now we just need to adjust the perspective of these flags. So what we'll do is transform, right click, and then click on skew, and this will enable us to just drag any point like so to fit the perspective of this container. So now we can just drag these points, and as you can see right now, this is in proper perspective. Then it's just a matter of just placing it where you want. Let's have this in the middle of the blue container, and if you need to go ahead and just adjust the points even further, you can do that simply by clicking on skew and then just going ahead and continuing the process. Yep, looking really nice. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is I'm going to go ahead and double click on this layer, and we'll be using blend if to go ahead and just remove some of the darker tones in this flag. And by doing so, we are going to be creating a sort of grungy texture in the flag. So under current layer, let's go ahead and just drag the point up like so, and get to something like 25, and then we'll just hold out Alt or Option to split it and just drag even more, as you can see, and just keep going until you start to see a grungy texture appear on the flag. So let's just go ahead and just do it a bit more, and as you can see, we are now getting a sort of texture on this flag right here. Let's just continue on a little bit more. But don't overdo this step, guys. And of course, since the white is super prominent, let's do the same for the whites. So let's just drag like so. and then go ahead and just split it by holding down Option or Alt and just smoothing this out a bit more. Yep, to something maybe like this. Looks pretty good. Okay, now let's click OK, and this is before and this is after. It just looks like this flag is now embossed within the container, and it looks a lot more realistic than before. This just looks like an image has been slapped on top of the container, and now we have a flag which looks like it's been spray painted onto this container. It just looks more realistic. Now guys, feel free to spend as much time as you want adjusting the settings. Maybe we can bring back some more of the whites. Yep, to something like this, because of course we don't want this to be completely blurred out. We do want it to be visible from a distance as well, so let's not overdo this effect. Okay, let's click OK. I'm pretty happy with how this looks, and let's now go ahead and do the same step, and we are going to add this flag to a couple more containers. I'm thinking 2 more for this thumbnail, so let's add one right here, and let's add one maybe on this red one or blue one. Let's go ahead and start that process. So what I'm going to do is simply create a duplicate. Let's press Command or Control J to create a duplicate layer, and let's just drag this to this blue can right here. Let's just transform and try and get this relatively accurate from the get-go. Let's just have these same dimensions in place. Then let's just right click and skew, and let's just bring all these points to the correct positions, and you can just toggle between transform and skew to get the positioning right. So let's just now go ahead and right click, skew, and drag this down like so. Pretty simple guys, as you can see right here. Now if you feel like this doesn't look as good as the first one, that's because there's different colors we're working with, and so since this is a lighter color, maybe we need to make this flag slightly more prominent. So what we can do is just double click on the settings, and we can just go ahead and maybe just increase the whites like so, and maybe just bring back some of the darker tones. So bring this back a slight bit like so guys. As you can see, it just helps to bring things back to life. Yeah, this looks much better. Okay, and then just make sure to get the dimensions right. Let's just go ahead and skew, bring this down, bring this down. Yep, looking really nice. Now let's just do it one more time for this red container right here. So let's just drag a duplicate. You can hold down Alt or Option and just simply drag on the layer to create a duplicate. And let's have this in the center of this red container at the bottom. So let's go ahead and just do the same steps. Command or Control T, let's just drag this to the corner like so, and let's go ahead and increase the size of this flag till that bottom point reaches the end of the container. Yep, as you can see right here, and then let's just right click and click on skew and adjust the points to the perspective of this container. Looking really good. Okay, let's have this in the center. Yep, looking nice. Maybe we could just transform and drag this down a bit. Yep, and like I mentioned, just toggle between skew and transform to get this perfect. Now from first glance guys, I think we need to bring back some of the blues for this flag, so let's just go ahead and double click on the layer and just bring back some of the darker tones into this flag. Like so, and maybe we can just do it like this. Yep, looking pretty good. Now since we brought back some of the blues, the reds are now too prominent, so let's just see if we can go into the reds and try and adjust this. Nope, that removes the blue, so let's go into blend if blue, and we can just tone down the red stripes a slight bit more than before. Okay, so yep, this is working well. Let's go ahead and press Alt or Option and drag. And as you can see, we are now just removing some of the reds so that it's not too prominent. Let's click OK. Have a little look. Let's just zoom out. Yeah, this looks really nice. Okay, let's now do the same thing for the right hand side. We are going to add some Chinese flags to these containers. Okay, so what I have right here is the flag we will be using, and let's just drag this into our document and let's just repeat the exact same steps. Okay, so I'm going to try and do this slightly quicker than before. Let's just rename this to China flag container. Okay, perfect. So let's just right click and convert this into a smart object, transform to bring it down to size. Yep, like so. And let's go ahead and just do the same thing, guys. So what I want is to sort of match what we had going on right here onto this side, just to make things look more balanced and pleasing to the eye. So let's just do the same thing on the right hand side in the exact same positions. Okay, so let's just drag this down. Let's just match the dimensions with the corner. And let's just right click, skew, and just go ahead and start adjusting these dimensions. As you can see, looking pretty good. Let's just bring this to the middle and then we can adjust the dimensions once more. And just toggle between transform and skew to get the result you want. Now let's just zoom out and have a look if it matches the sizing or scale of this American flag. Yep, it's pretty accurate. Maybe we can make it a slight bit smaller. So let's just bring it in from the sides like this and just drag this up a slight bit more. Okay, looking good. Yep, we can work with this. And now let's just do our blend if. So let's just double click and go ahead and just remove some of the darker shades. Let's bring this over here so we can see. Hold down Alt or Option to just smoothen it out and just keep going until you start to get a sort of grungy texture on your flag. Yep, as you can see right here. Just keep going. Maybe we can do it on the white side just to get a bit of the whites out. And then hold Alt or Option just to smoothen it out a slight bit. Nope, let's just keep that at the end. It's not doing too much for us. And let's just keep blending this out to something maybe like this. This looks pretty good to me. Let's click OK. Just zoom out, have a look. Maybe we can just decrease the amount of texture to something like this. I think this looks much better. Let's now add two more flags in. So let's go ahead and just duplicate this one. Hold Alt or Option and drag to duplicate. And let's just go ahead and just do the same thing. Let's place it on this blue container right here. Okay, let's just get the dimensions in the relatively right place. And let's go ahead and right click and skew and just adjust these points. Yep, maybe we can just adjust this a tiny bit more. Yep, looking good. I just want to fade this out a little bit more. It's too strong in my opinion. Maybe we can just remove a bit more of the darker colors. This looks fine. And now let's just do this one more time. So let's hold down Alt or Option, drag like so, and then let's just do the exact same thing. So let's just bring this to the corner of the red container like so. Let's just increase the size of this container until it reaches the bottom point like so, and then just right click and skew and adjust the perspective. Yep, let's just bring this to the center. And just adjust the size. Right click, we can do skew and just adjust these points a bit more. Okay, now let's just have a look at this. I think this needs a bit more blending in, so let's just use our blend if and go ahead and just adjust these settings. I think we need to remove more of the darker tones, so let's just drag this up. Yep, and maybe blend this out a bit more. Yep, maybe we can remove some of the whites. We've done this before and we didn't get a good result, so I am a bit hesitant with this step. Yep, but actually we are doing a good job this time. Yep, this looks much better. Okay guys, one quick adjustment that I want to make. As you can see, the background is really grainy, so I just want to remove some of that grainy texture. So what we can do is just go to the sky layer, let's just right click and convert to a smart object, and then click on filter and camera raw filter. In here we can go to detail and just increase the noise reduction. Let's take this up to something like 30. Okay, looking much better. Let's click OK. And as you can see now, we've just reduced the grain. That way, when we go ahead and add some grain at the very end, we're not going to have any elements having more grain than the other. And so everything's going to look balanced. Okay, now it's time to add in the tariff tape. Now we are going to create this ourselves. We are not going to be using any images. And the reason for adding in this tariff tape is just to help us with communicating the message of this thumbnail, which is that Donald Trump is increasing the tariffs. This is just a visual element which is really going to help to build up the idea of the two countries having a trade war. And so let's go ahead and start that process. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all is just go ahead and create a new layer at the very top, and I'm just going to simply press Shift and Backspace, and we are going to fill this in with 50% grey. You can select that from this box right here, click OK, and we are going to do this simply so that we have a blank canvas and we can create our own tariff tape, and then we can remove this layer once we're done. That way we have no distractions and there's no elements getting in the way. We can visually see what we're working with. Okay, now the first step will be to select the marquee tool right here, and we are going to try and make the desired shape that we want right now. So of course we want to create that sort of tape which you see in documentary and investigation thumbnails, that sort of crime scene tape. We are just going to do that but for tariffs. So let's create the shape that we want. Something like this will do for now. Once you have your selection, let's then go ahead and just select the adjustment layers and select solid color like so. Then we can go ahead and just select the color of this tape. Let's have it be something like this. Yep, something like this will do, and let's click OK. Once you have done that, let's just go ahead and right click and convert to a smart object, and then go ahead and right click once again and rasterize layout so that we can go ahead and edit this shape. Let's then just zoom in like so and go ahead and create a new layer above this yellow layer. Okay, before that we can just quickly go ahead and write down tariff tape. Yep. Perfect. And let's now, on this new layer that we've just created, go ahead and press B for the brush tool, have the color set to a black color, and go ahead and just decrease the size of the brush to something like this. Let's also make sure to have the flow to 100 and make sure that you have a soft brush as well. Okay, and now we are just simply going to click on one end like so, and then click on the other like so. Let's just create another line going across this tape. Now once you've done this, let's go ahead and click on filter and blur and Gaussian blur, and let's just blur this to something like 1 pixels. Maybe we can take this to 1.3. Yep, that looks good. And then we want to decrease the opacity of these lines. So let's just take this down to something very low, something like, let's say 10% for now. Yep, and then let's go ahead and create another layer right above and go ahead and just change the color to white. Now let's just do the same thing, but for some white lines, let's just click on a point and then hold down Shift and click to create a straight line. And let's just do that a few times like so. Perfect. Okay, that's looking good. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. Filter, blur, and Gaussian blur, and let's just keep it to 1.3 and just decrease the opacity of this one as well to something like 30 opacity, and let's see if any of the blend modes do a better job. Yep, overlay does a better job. And now let's just go ahead and select all of these layers and go ahead and press Command or Control E to merge them all together. Let's now use the marquee tool, make a selection just to remove the ends. And what you have right now is the start of a tariff tape. Now, since we've added in some highlights, you can see that this is starting to look quite real, and it looks as if we've added in a texture, in which case we haven't really done so, just simply added some light. Okay, maybe we could take this a step further. Go ahead and press B for the brush tool, make another layer on top. Let's just rename this to tariff once again. And now on the layer above, we are just going to decrease the brush size to a very small size, have the white color selected, and let's just do the same thing one more time, just maybe in the middle, or maybe we can do one more. Let's now go ahead and go to filter, blur and Gaussian blur, and let's just go ahead and now decrease the opacity all the way down so that we have a couple of layers of light on this string. Let's now go ahead and just merge them together, Command or Control E, and then just remove the ends with the marquee tool. So just press backspace to remove these from the selection. And now we have our tariff tape. And now I think we can add some blur as well. So let's click on the tape. Let's just right click and convert it into a smart object just for the moment. And let's go ahead and click on filter, blur and Gaussian blur, like so, and just have the radius be to something, let's say like 0.7. Yep, click OK. Now let's click within the Smart Filters layer mask and just invert that by pressing Command or Control I, like so, so that the effect is now invisible on the tape. Let's press B for the brush tool, have the white color selected, and let's just paint over the edges to add back in this blur. As you can see, we are just blurring out the edges of this tape. Yep. Like so. Yeah, looking much better than before, slightly more realistic. And now let's go ahead and add in our type. So I'm going to press T for the type tool, click on this tariff tape, and we are using the font Tabara Black Regular. Okay, let's just type in tariff in capital letters, and then let's just increase the size of this text till it fits relatively nicely on the tape. Yep. Maybe we can bring this down a bit. Maybe even a little bit smaller, guys. I'm quite nitpicky with this stuff. Okay, yeah, this looks good. Actually, let's correct this. It's tariffs, since we are referring to more than one tariff that Donald Trump is imposing. So let's get that right. Okay, looking good. Let's now drag the American flag into our canvas, like so. Looking good. And let's just scale this down to size. Yep, maybe we can make this slightly smaller. Yep, and maybe we can just make the text a slight bit smaller as well. Yep, this is looking much better. Okay, now I want to add a bit of a spotlight on top of the tariffs text. So what I'm going to do is create a new layer, like so, above the tariffs layer, and go ahead and add a clipping mask by holding down Alt or Option in between the two layers. Let's press B for the brush tool, have the white color selected, and your flow set to 100. Let's just add a little dab of light to the top of this text. I think this just adds a nice little effect to the text. Now let's just merge all the layers referring to the tape into one layer. So select all of your layers and then press Command or Control E, like so. Okay, let's just rename this to tariff tape once more. And go ahead and now with the marquee tool, remove the excess tape like so. Okay, so press backspace after selecting the tape. Okay, now with this tape right here, let's go ahead and duplicate this. So press down Alt or Option and Shift and drag to create a duplicate. And then let's just do this one more time. Hold down Alt or Option and hold down Shift and drag. Okay, looking really nice. Let's just zoom out. Yep, looking really nice. Okay, looking good. Now what we can do is just merge all these layers together. So merge them together one more time, press Command or Control E, and we now have the tariff tape. So what I'm going to do now is just delete this gray layer since we no longer need it, and we can now just focus on positioning this tape on our canvas. Okay, looking good. Now what I want to do just quickly before I move on is just go ahead and select every single layer and just drag this into our backups folder. There may be even excessive duplicates, that's fine. We just want to make sure everything is in the backups folder just as a backup if we need it. Now of course, when it comes to finalizing your document, if you feel that you've done everything correctly, you can go ahead and delete all the backups. But whilst we're in the thumbnail workflow, let's just make sure that we have backups of every single element. So I'm just going to quickly create a duplicate of this tape right here, and I'm just going to hide this one as we want to just make some adjustments to this tape, and I don't know if I'll get this perfect the first time. Of course, that's why we make duplicates, guys. Okay, so what I want to do with this tape right here is first of all just resize it to something like this. Yeah. Okay, and I also want to create a bit of a curvature in this tape. Now, how we can do this is simply by using the warp tool. But first, let's just transform just to get it at a bit of an angle. Yeah, maybe something like this. And then let's go ahead and just place this tape layer behind this container. Like so. Yep, looking good. And then let's go ahead and transform, right click, and warp this, and we can focus on just adding a bit of a bend to this tape, as you can see right here. So just keep adjusting, and with warp you may need to spend a bit of time with it. You're not going to get it completely right the first time. You need to just continue to adjust until you get the desired shape right. So maybe let's pull this down. And you can see, guys, that you have to spend quite a bit of time on this step. There's no real way to do this fast. So yeah, what I'm trying to do is just get a nice curvature, something that looks good. And this is something you will need to train your eye with just to get the right shape in general. So what I'm trying to do is create a sort of shape like this, maybe like this. Yeah, looking decent. Maybe we can move this a little bit up here and just continue to warp once again. And now let's just go ahead and duplicate this layer once again. And we are going to place this one behind Donald Trump. Place it behind Donald Trump like so. And we are just going to bring this to an angle. Maybe we can decrease the size of the one at the back. Yeah. To something like this, guys, and you can experiment with the positioning as much as you want. Okay, looking good. Let's just go ahead and remove our tariff tape backup that we created earlier, and now let's just come back to the tariff tape at the back, very back right here, and let's now go ahead and add a subtle Gaussian blur to the one at the back. So first, let's just right click and convert this into a smart object. Let's click on filter, blur, and Gaussian blur, and let's keep it to something like 1 pixel. Yep, looking really nice. Looks good to me. Okay, now let's just zoom in and see if we've positioned it right. Yep, there's a little gap there, so let's just move this more to the right. And if we have any gap right here in the top corner, we can fix that quickly by just increasing the size a slight bit. Now with this tariff tape at the very front, I just want to adjust the angle a slight bit more. And of course, this is thumbnail design, guys. You may like something at first and then you decide, I could probably change that for something better. And that's what's happening right here. Maybe we can just adjust the angle. I think we can get a better result than before. Yeah, this looks much better to me. Okay, what I want to do now, guys, is make sure that this tariff tape is not overlapping with Donald Trump's hand. So what I'm going to do is create a layer mask on the tariff tape layer, and I'm just simply going to make a selection of Donald Trump. So select the Donald Trump layer, hold down Command or Control and click like so to create a selection, and then let's go back to our tariff tape, and within the layer mask, let's press B for the brush tool, and with the color black, let's just paint out the parts which overlap. Okay, so these parts right here, as you can see, they overlap, and so they don't look too good. Yep, so what we can do is actually move this up a bit, to maybe something like this, and I think now we should have a good result. Let's do the same thing. So make a selection of Donald Trump and go ahead and just remove the excess like so. Yep, perfect. Looking really nice. Yep, looks good to me. And now we can go ahead and just tidy things up. If you can see right here, it looks a bit dodgy. So let's just remove that little edge. Yep, looking nice. And now we can move on to the next step, which is to add in our text. Okay guys, so at the very top, let's press T for the type tool and let's just type in trade in capital letters. And let's go ahead and just increase the size of this. And then let's go ahead and create a duplicate of this. So just hold down Alt or Option and click and drag. And then we can edit this text to war. Okay. Make sure it's in capitals once again. And now let's just align this text. And we want the text at the bottom to slightly overlap with the text on the top. Yep, so maybe we can just decrease the size of the text at the bottom a slight bit. And now it doesn't look too good, but it will look much better in just a moment. Just bear with me guys. Okay guys, so I've just adjusted the text, and I've also, for both of these text layers, I've just decreased the spacing to -10 just to bring the letters closer together a slight bit. Okay, so once we've done that, let's now go ahead and focus on adding in our gradients to the text. So let's start off with trade right here. Let's click on gradients overlay, and here is the gradient you need to have if you are following along with this tutorial, but feel free to experiment yourself. So here is the location for the light blue, location 53, and here is the hex code for that color. Okay, click OK and follow all of the settings you see on screen if you're following along with this tutorial. Okay, now let's focus on adding in texture onto both of our text layers. So what we need to do first of all is just right click and convert both of our text layers into a smart object. So let's just do that really quickly. And then right here we have the texture that we'll be using today. Let's go ahead and just drag this into our document like so. And let's start off with the text layer trade. Let's just go ahead and just scale this down and make sure it's above the trade layer like so. And then let's add a clipping mask to this trade layer. So let's hold down Alt or Option and just clip the texture to the trade text. Just go ahead and bring it down to the correct position. So somewhere like here. And just make sure that the texture is visible within the text. Something like this looks pretty good. Let's then go ahead and decrease the opacity to 50%. And this is really personal preference, guys. Depending on how much texture you want to be visible in the text, you can adjust the opacity either up or down. I think we can even take this to 55. And what I want to do now, guys, is create a layer mask on our texture layer, like so. Then we'll go ahead and with the black color, press B for the brush tool, and using a soft brush, we are just going to paint out the texture from the very top, just to create this sort of effect on our text where we have texture at the bottom, but as it goes to the top, we have no texture. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Maybe we can increase the opacity to 60, and you can paint parts back in. If you think you've removed too much, you can just simply alternate the color back to white and paint your texture back in, and then have a go once again. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. Now let's focus on adding texture to the bottom text layer. So let's go ahead and just duplicate our texture, place it at the very top and clip it to the war layer. Okay, looking good so far. Let's just drag this down so that the texture is visible on the text. And let's now click within the layer mask, reset it by simply pressing Command or Control A to highlight the whole canvas. And then we can just simply press backspace. And now we can just simply, with the black color, go ahead and paint out parts which we don't want once again. Okay, so let's go ahead. First of all, I think we should just move this texture down a bit. Let's just zoom in. And I just want to remove a slight bit from the very top, but not too much. Yeah, something like this works just fine. Okay, what I think I'm going to do is press B for the brush tool. Let's go back to our textures, and I think with a flow of, let's say, 30%, I'm just going to paint a little bit back on top with the white color selected, just to bring some texture back, but not too much, just so it doesn't look completely blank, which doesn't look too good in my opinion. Let's just go ahead and just paint slight bits of the texture back on top, but of course it's still less than what we have at the bottom. Now let's focus on adding in the drop shadows to our text. So let's start off with trade. Let's double click and add a drop shadow like so. And let's go ahead and just adjust the opacity down to maybe 55 for now, and we can adjust this afterwards, but let's keep it to 55 for now and size 79. Let's just do the same thing for the other layer. Go ahead and click on wall, drop shadow, and let's just have these same settings, which is already on there. That's looking really good. Let's click OK. Okay, now I want to create a bit more separation between these two text layers. So what we can do is just create a new layer and place it below the wall layer like so. Okay, looking good. And let's just rename this to shadow, and let's go ahead and press B for the brush tool, and let's just adjust the shape of this brush. So let's go over here and adjust the shape of this brush. Okay, looking good. Yep. And then we can just adjust the flow to something. Let's say we'll put it to 15%. Yep. And let's just zoom in. And now let's just paint behind this text layer like so, just to create a bit more separation between the two text layers. Looking nice. Yep, so if we zoom out, now you can see there's a lot more separation between the two text layers. Let's just adjust the opacity to 75 will do the trick. Okay, looking much better than before. This is before and this is after. Moving on, we've nearly added all of our elements into this thumbnail. Now all that's left to do is add in a couple more elements, and then we will move on to blending. Now the next element that I want to add in is just a bit of smoke at the bottom region of this thumbnail. So what I have right here is an image with smoke. We are going to get the marquee tool and just make a selection of this part of the image, and then we'll press Command or Control J to make a duplicate of that selection. Then we can just drag that part into our document like so. Click yes, and let's go ahead and just decrease the size. Yep, maybe we can increase the size a bit more. Yep, to something like this. And now let's just go ahead and duplicate that by pressing Alt or Option and holding down Shift and dragging. And then we can go ahead and press Command or Control T, right click and flip horizontal. And then just go ahead and join the two together like so. Okay, once you've done that, let's go ahead and merge these two layers together. So Command or Control E. Yep, perfect. And let's just rename this layer to smoke. And now guys, let's just press transform and go ahead and scale this down a bit more till it fits on the canvas. Okay, looking really good right now. Yep, and then we can go ahead and select the blending mode screen and just decrease the opacity down to something like 25. Looking good. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and create a layer mask. Press B for the brush tool and have the black color selected and have your flow set to 100%. And we can now just paint this out from the top so that we have this hazy / smoky background at the bottom. It just helps to create the illusion of depth a little bit more. Maybe we can take this up to 28. Yeah, that looks good. Now let's go ahead and enhance this depth effect even more. I'm going to create a new layer and place it below all of our text layers. So it should be below all of your text. Okay, let's just rename this to haze like so. And now let's press B for the brush tool once again. And we are going to source a color in the background. Something like this, which is just similar to the color of the atmosphere in the background. And let's set the flow down to something very small, like maybe 2%. Okay, and now we can just simply paint in our own manual haze into this background like so. So just paint in your own haze, and if you just toggle between before and after, you can see that you're actually painting it in just to help blend in some of these elements. Okay, and then let's just decrease the opacity down to something like 25% as well. And this is before and this is after, so you can see a slight haze. Let's take this up to 40% so you can actually see the difference. This is before and this is after. Just a nice little haze added to this background. And now to add in the final element, which is a sort of war icon, which we are going to place in the center right here. Of course, like I mentioned, just like the tariff tape, these are elements which, if you have them within your thumbnail, are going to help you in communicating the message. Okay, so what we have here is the sword icon, and I'm just simply going to place this within our canvas like so. Let's place this behind Donald Trump. So let's just find Donald Trump, yep, right here. And let's just place it behind Donald Trump. Okay, let's also do it behind the tariff tape as well, so that we don't have any overlap. Okay, this is looking good. Yep, perfect. Okay, now let's go ahead and just scale this down a slight bit and just bring it up to something like this. Okay, and now let's just try and center it. Let's also go ahead and change the color of this simply by pressing Command or Control I to invert the color like so. We've just changed the color of this icon. And then I want to decrease the opacity all the way down until it's quite subtle in the background, but is visible and you can see it quite clearly. This is looking good. Let's just name this layer. So let's just double click and go ahead and type in sword icon. And now let's just add a bit of light in the center. So click on a new layer and go ahead and create that above the sword icon. And we can just go ahead and press B for the brush tool and just source a sort of bright color in the atmosphere. Maybe something like this. And let's just paint a dab of light in the center and change the blending mode to linear dodge add. Yeah, that's looking good. And let's just decrease the opacity of this ever so slightly. Maybe to 60%, so this is before and this is after, just to bring a little bit more attention to the sword icon. What we can also do is just go ahead and enhance this effect even more. Just go ahead and click on the color picker and just increase the brightness of the color we have already. So just simply drag up like so. And let's just do that one more time, but a little bit smaller. Like so. Yep, just adding a bit of light. Now we've placed all of our elements on screen. It took us a while, but we got there in the end. If you're still watching, I commend you for your discipline to staying focused. Let's now go ahead and start the blending process. Now a lot of people actually don't know how to blend thumbnails together, how to blend scenes together so that everything looks like it's within the scene. I'm going to show you how you can do that within your thumbnails today. Now you can use these techniques and strategies in your thumbnails. It doesn't have to be related to only this thumbnail, any thumbnail with a scene. Follow the steps that I'm going to teach you today and you'll be creating much more realistic scenes in your thumbnails. Now there's one quick thing we need to do before we start blending, and that is just to refine all the elements on screen. So if we look at our elements, what things could we improve? What things do we need to work on just before we start to blend? Because once you start blending in, the layers are going to stack up really quickly and things just become messy. So it's better if we do it right now. Now, of course, if we just zoom in, you can see that this image is not blended at the bottom. It's a very sharp line we have for the cutout of this image, and you can say the same for Donald Trump right here. So we need to blend these in better, and we can start that simply by selecting the layer. So just find the layer of President Xi. Yep, right here. Let's go ahead and add a layer mask. Like so that we have created one. And now with the brush tool selected, having the color set to black and your flow set to 100 and having a soft brush, let's just soften the edges like so that this image almost blends in perfectly with the scene. As you can see, let's just undo this and try again. Yep, to something like this. And you can see if you zoom in, you can start to see the edge of the flag. So we don't want that to be the case. So let's go to the Chinese flag and just soften that out as well, so it's not visible through the subject image. Okay, this is looking good. And so as you can see now, we've just blended this image into the scene so it doesn't distract the viewer and look odd. We can also do the same right here. If we just go ahead and start to blend some out, let's make sure we are on the actual layer. Let's go to President Xi's layer mask and let's just do the same thing right here. Let's just undo that and decrease the size of the brush and just blend out parts of the image. Now you can see the flag again is coming into play. And so let's go ahead and just remove that like so. Looking really nice. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same thing for Donald Trump. So let's just zoom into Donald Trump and let's go ahead and select the layer mask. Like so. If you haven't created one already, just simply click on the mask. And let's now, with the black color selected and all the options the same, let's go ahead and do the same thing on this side. So let's just mask some out right here so that he blends in with the atmosphere and you don't have any sharp lines. Do the same here. Yep, looking good. Let's go ahead and click on this American flag. Let's just remove some from here. As you can see, I hope this makes sense, guys. We are just blending this image into the scene. Yep, looking really nice. Maybe we can undo some right here for Donald Trump. So I'm going to have the white color now just to bring back some of the image. Oops, wrong one. Let's click on Donald Trump and just paint this back in. And we can redo this. Again, you can spend as much time as you want on this step. Okay, so let's have the black color selected and let's try it again and just be a little more subtle with this effect. Yeah, this is looking much better. Okay, looking really good. Now one more thing, if we just zoom in, you can see that there's a bit of an imperfection right here. So let's just remove that very quickly. I am going to select the container layer, if I can do that. Where is it? Yep, containers left, perfect. Let's just use the pen tool like so and just make a selection of this region. Make a selection and then go ahead and select the layer mask. Press B for the brush tool and you can just paint this out using the black color. Let's do the same on this side since this is an exact duplicate. Let's go ahead and just make a selection. Yep. Make the selection and then just select the layer. And just remove this as well. Okay, now we can focus on the blending. So the first step of the blending process will be just to match the opacity of certain elements. As you can see right now, there are some elements on our screen which are just so much more prominent than others. As you can see, these flags in the background and this tariff tape, they are really prominent and catch a lot of your eye, as opposed to these containers right here, which pretty much look blended into the scene. So what we can do for starters is just decrease the opacity of our flags. And I am aware that they don't match with the scene as well. We are going to get to that, guys, do not worry. We are just focusing on the opacity first. Let's take this down to something like 60%. Already that's looking much better. And let's just do the same for the right hand side. Let's take this down to 60%. And as you can see, that already sort of blends the images into the scene much better than before. Okay, now with the tariff tape, I don't actually want to lower the opacity because that's going to ruin the quality of the image. So if we can just do that really quickly, just to show you, if I decrease the opacity, it becomes transparent. So we will tackle that. Do not worry. Let's also adjust the opacity of these flags. So every single flag right here, I'm just going to remove the haze for a second so that I can select all of our flags. Yep, so let's just select all these three at once, all of our American flags on the containers, and let's just decrease the opacity of these to maybe, let's say 70% or maybe 75%. Yep, that's looking good. And for the one at the very bottom, if I can find it, yeah, the one at the very bottom, we are going to lower the opacity of this bottom one, since if you remember, we removed some of the bottom of the containers, so it wouldn't make sense if this has a very high opacity. We have to sort of match with the scene. So let's take this one down a bit more, maybe to 50% like so. Looking much better. Let's do the same for the Chinese ones. Let's go ahead and select all of the layers. Go ahead and just decrease the opacity initially to 75. And then let's select the one at the bottom right here and take this down to 50. Yep, so this is looking much more realistic and blended in. I think we can add a bit more opacity back into these flags. And as you can see, guys, I am adjusting as I go along, and this is the nature of thumbnail design. You make mistakes and you want to improve on certain parts. So let's go ahead and just add a bit more opacity into the background flags. And that's simply because I don't want this to be an invisible background element. I want people to actually see these flags. It's an important part of the thumbnail. So of course that little adjustment was needed. Okay, now I want to explain the blending process because this is where you guys really need to pay attention. Now the blending process consists of 3 different stages. The first stage is adjusting the values, the second stage is adjusting the saturation, and the third and final stage is fixing the colors. I'm going to take you through all of those 3 phases, and I'll also add in an extra phase at the end, which is phase 4, which is just adding a bit of manual light back into the scene. So let's get started. Now our layers section is going to start getting messy, so let's just group all of these singular elements like so. Yep, let's do Chinese flag. Let's just go ahead and group that. Chinese flag. Let's do it in capitals. Close that. Sword icon. That deserves its own group. We can actually place that highlight into that group as well. American flag. You get the gist of this, guys. I'm going to go ahead and speed up this process so that for you watching, you don't have to waste your time watching me do this. But go ahead and just group all of your elements into their own separate groups. And now we can start to focus on adjusting the values. Now when I say values, what I'm basically referring to is the brightness level of all of the elements in our thumbnail. Now there are some elements right now which are brighter than the others, and our job and objective is just to make sure that all the elements match in brightness level. Now you can do this simply by looking at the thumbnail and adjusting manually, but I would always recommend that when you are adjusting all of the values that you create a black and white layer. So let's get started with that process. So let's go ahead and click on our adjustment layers and create a black and white layer like so. Just make sure, guys, that the black and white layer is at the very top so that everything in your thumbnail is in black and white. Now when we are looking at this thumbnail through the lens of a black and white layer, any element on this thumbnail which is overly bright will show in the form of a white color on this thumbnail. So as you can see, the hand is very bright and there are some spotlights on Donald Trump's face. Of course, the text is very bright, it's a white color, but we're not going to be adjusting the values of the text. We want that element to stand out in the thumbnail. We're just referring to the elements in the scene at this point. As you can see, there are maybe just some areas in the thumbnail which just need to be adjusted in values. So all the elements which are overly bright in our thumbnail, we are going to tone those down, and the theory is that by the end of this process, all of the images should be in the sort of grayish range. There shouldn't be any elements with this overly white color. Apart from the text and the icon, I'm going to keep those separate. I'm not going to adjust the values of those elements. So let's start off with the American flag. Let's select that and let's create a curves layer. Go ahead and clip that to the American flag. And now to adjust the brightness value, all you really need to focus on is the top right corner, and you want to bring this point down to adjust the brightness. Now we want to bring this down until we match with the scene and the colors going on in the scene, in the atmosphere. As you can see, we have a lot of gray values, so we just want to make sure that it matches and blends in well with the atmosphere. As you can see, the grayish tone that's starting to appear in the American flag is visibly similar to the tones we have in the background elements, which is what we want if we want to blend this in a realistic way. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and do the same for the Chinese flag. So create a curves layer and just do the same thing. Clip it to the image and go ahead and adjust the values until it blends in with the scene. I hope this is making sense, guys. So as you can see, we have these gray tones going on and it pretty much just fades into the background, which is what we are trying to go for. So that means the brightness values are matching. Okay, let's move on to the left container. Right, so let's just select that. Now everything is easier since we organize things, guys, which is what I was trying to tell you. Okay, let's move into container left and do the same thing. Let's create a curves layer. Clip it and go ahead and adjust the brightness values. Looking good, maybe to something like this. Okay, let's do the same thing for the container on the right. We can simply just go ahead and paste this in to the right folder and just clip this. We want these values to be the same for both of these containers. Yeah, that's looking good. Now the American flags on the containers right here are overly bright, the white strips in particular. So let's go ahead and adjust those values. So let's go ahead and click on American flag containers and just click on the first flag and let's go ahead and adjust these values. So create a curves layer, clip that to the image and let's just bring the values down like so. Okay, now this is having an adverse effect since we used blend if. This is sort of counteracting what we're trying to do. So what I'll do is just remove this curves layer like so, and we can just adjust the opacity as a way of just decreasing the brightness values. Yeah, that's having the same sort of effect. So let's just take the opacity to something like maybe 55%. And let's do the same for all of the other flags. So let's select this one right here and adjust the opacity down to 55. And for the one at the very bottom, which is this one, and go ahead and adjust the opacity of this one even further down. Since this one was already lower opacity than the others, let's take this one down to something, yep, maybe like 35%. Looking really nice. Okay, so as you can see now, we've managed to blend those in a bit better. And on the Chinese flag side, we pretty much don't have to do anything. These are actually blended in pretty well, so we're not going to target those Chinese flags in this scenario. Let's move on to the tariff tape. Yep, and let's go ahead and just create a curves layer, clip that, and go ahead and adjust the values. Yep, so let's focus on the one at the front first of all. Bring this down to something maybe like this. Yep, looking good. And we can do the same thing, just copy this into the other tariff tape layer. Let's drag it into this group and then just clip it to the tariff tape at the back. Yep, looking really nice. Now it's very clear that the only two elements that we need to adjust are the subjects. So let's go ahead and work on matching the values of the subjects to the atmosphere. So let's target Donald Trump first of all. So let's just open up this group, go ahead and create a curves layer and just clip that to the image and decrease the brightness values. You get what we're trying to do here. Yeah, maybe to something like this. Looks really good. Much better in my opinion. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for President Xi. So let's close this one. Go ahead and open up this group, create a curves layer, clip this to the image and go ahead and do the same thing. Yep, looking really nice. Looking really nice, guys. Now you can see that everything is just blended in really well, just from a values perspective right now. Okay, what we're going to do now, guys, is just go ahead and add in a couple more manual adjustments just to decrease the values of some certain parts of this thumbnail. Like if we zoom in right here, you can see that the shirt is still quite bright, and the same thing for the shirt of Donald Trump. So what we can do is just simply go ahead and just create another curves layer. Let's start off with President Xi, clip that to the image and go ahead and drag this all the way down like so. Let's invert this layer mask so that it's not visible, and we can just press B for the brush tool, and with the white color selected and your flow set to maybe, let's say 40%, we can just paint over the shirt just to decrease the values. Okay, that's very high, guys. Let's keep this to something like 5%. I think that will work much better. Yep, and we are just going to sort of paint over the shirt just to decrease the values even further. Hope it makes sense, guys. Yep, that's looking better. Let's do the same thing for Donald Trump. So let's go ahead and close this group. Create a new curves layer, clip it, go ahead and just decrease the values really low, invert the mask, and let's just do the same thing on the shirt. This is just a good way of targeting very specific parts of an image, as opposed to adjusting the values of the complete image itself. You can really just target certain spots which are just overly bright in your opinion. What we can do for Donald Trump, since he had a lot of spotlights on his face as well, we can just darken some of these. As you can see, if we zoom in, there's a lot of white areas. We can just add a bit of darkness to those areas. We don't need to be overkill with this, guys, but you know, let's just do what we can with what is clearly visible. Yep, looking good. Maybe we can just target a bit of the hair. Yep, looking much better. Much better. Let's zoom into President Xi. Let's target his face as well. So let's go back into our group and just use the curves layer that we created and just go over the face as well, just to darken some of the lighter areas. Maybe I'll just take the flow down to something like 2%. I think we can have more control with this low flow. Yep, that's much better. So that we don't overdo it and make things look odd. Now the reason why I'm trying to sort of remove any spotlights on the face is because we want to be able to add our own light manually to the face of the subject. So I don't want any existing light or spotlights to be prominent on the face, because then it won't look realistic and it just makes it look like you've taken an image off of the internet and sort of pasted it into the scene, which is what I'm trying to avoid here. On the lips as well. Yep, looking much better. Maybe we can just decrease the brightness of President Xi a tiny bit more. Yep, to maybe something like this. So yep, you can see that we've done a really good job of blending our subjects into this thumbnail. Let's just undo what we've done, just so that you can see the difference. This is before. So adding in the first initial curves layer to Donald Trump and then going ahead with some extra adjustments afterwards to really just remove any of the spotlights using the brush tool. That's just really now blending in well with the scene. The same can be said for President Xi, so this is the first curves layer that we applied, and then going in with even more adjustments with the brush tool. Look at what we've been able to do here. All the elements within our thumbnail are now perfectly blended from a value standpoint. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is just remove our black and white layer, and now everything is matching in terms of values. But if you look at the thumbnail right now, you can pretty much see that some colors are overpowering others, and that is why we now have to focus on adjusting the saturation of all of our elements. The goal is simply the same thing we did for the values. We are just going to make sure that nothing is overpowering and that the saturation of all of our elements are in the same range. So now we are going to move on to phase 2, which is adjusting the saturation. Now when we was adjusting the values, you could see that we created a black and white layer. Now for saturation, we are going to go ahead and use a selective color adjustment layer. Now just like with the black and white layer, you don't have to actually use it, but I would definitely recommend it if you want to get an accurate result. To adjust both the values and saturation, you can simply look at this thumbnail and just manually adjust those things. But these check layers which I'm telling you to create make it much more easier for you in general, which is why I'm going ahead and showing you this step. So let's go ahead and just select adjustment layers, click on selective color. And what we need to do now, guys, is adjust the settings for all of these colors really quickly. What we are going to do is start off with the reds. We are just going to take the blacks all the way down to -100. We'll do the same for all of the other colors. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly for the greens, cyans, blues, magentas. And now when you reach the last three options, which are the whites, neutrals and blacks, for those we are going to increase the blacks to 100%. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Like so. Now guys, we have now just created our check layer for saturation, and let me just explain what you need to look at. Any elements in this thumbnail which are extremely white, in this case you can see the tariff tape is a prime example, those elements are highly saturated, and so you would need to adjust those elements. We can see that pretty much everything in our thumbnail for the most part is in the sort of same range for saturation. We'll make some adjustments, but we definitely need to adjust the saturation of, let's say, the tariff tape and the Chinese flag, and maybe some of the containers as well. Those are the things which stand out, so let's go ahead and adjust the saturation of those elements. So for this step, I don't think we need to adjust the saturation of many of the elements, only a couple which stand out. So the tariff tape is the prime example. Let's start off with that one. So click on the tariff tape. This is the one at the front. Yep. And let's go ahead and create an adjustment layer and click on hue and saturation and just clip this to the image like so. Now I'm using the latest version of Photoshop as of the time of this recording, and you should have this option in the previous versions of Photoshop. We are going to click on this finger icon right here, and what this allows us to do is select a color within our thumbnail, and we can go ahead and manually adjust that specific color, and we are going to just decrease the saturation. So what I'm going to do is click right here as you can see, and now it's just picked a range of the colors. As you can see right here, this is the color range that it's picked. And then all we need to do, guys, is just decrease the saturation. And like with the black and white layer, we want to make sure that this is sort of darkened and the gray tones are matching with the scene, which means that we've adjusted the saturation to the right amount. So let's just bring this down to maybe something like this. Okay, this is looking good. Let's do the same thing for the tariff tape at the back. We can just simply go ahead and copy and paste this into that group. Go ahead and copy. So Command or Control C. And we're just going to paste this in like so. Go ahead and add a clipping mask. Yep, perfect. And now the tariff tape's saturation is matching with the other elements in this thumbnail. Let's go ahead and target these containers. So let's just click on the layer, which is container left. Yep, let's open up that group and go ahead and create a hue and saturation adjustment layer. Clip it to the image, and we are just going to use the finger icon like so, and we will just select the color of this container. As you can see, this is quite bright in relation to the other colors in the background, which are a sort of darker gray. So let's go ahead and adjust right now. Okay, so we've selected the color. Now we just need to decrease the saturation. And that's just going to adjust all of the containers of that same color, which I think is a blue color. Yep. So this is just adjusting the saturation. Okay, perfect. Let's now go ahead and select this one right here. Do the same thing. And so I hope you understand what I'm doing here, guys. We just want to reach the same tone which we have in the background. So as you can see, we have this gray, and now the container is pretty much blended in with the scene, which means from a saturation standpoint, it's in the right place. Okay, let's do the same for this one. Adjust the saturation. And as you can see, when we adjust the saturation of some of these containers, it does affect the other containers as well. So we need to be careful. We don't have to get this completely accurate, but we do want to make sure that nothing is overpowering. Yeah, this is much better than before. Much better. If I just undo that, you can see how much we've adjusted simply by using a hue and saturation adjustment layer. Much better in my opinion. Okay, maybe we can work on the final one, which is this one, and just adjust the saturation a bit more of this one. Yep, really, really nice. And of course, I'm going to copy that to the other container. Just paste that in the group and then clip it to the image. Yep, so both sides are equal. Now, if we just zoom in, you can clearly see that the Chinese flags are overly saturated, shown by this whitish color. So we need to bring these down to the grayish tones. So let's go ahead and just close this group. Let's go ahead and select the Chinese flag containers and go ahead and just do the same thing. Create a hue and saturation layer, clip it to the image, and then go ahead, well, which one is this? Yep, the one at the top, and just go ahead and decrease the saturation. Also, when you're using this finger icon right here, you can simply just click and drag as well to adjust the saturation. You don't only have to do it from this slider right here, if you didn't know that already. Okay, so maybe we can actually do it that way. I think it's better. Yep, it should blend in with the scene. Yeah, maybe to something like this. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the other ones. This one is the one at the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and just adjust. Really nice. And let's just do it for the final one. Hue and saturation, clip it to the image, and just adjust the saturation of this element. Lovely stuff. Yeah, looking really nice. Yeah, okay, we also need to do it for the stars as well. So let's just go back into each hue and saturation adjustment layer. And let's just target the stars as well. Maybe I can zoom in for this part. Yep, maybe to something like this. Yep, and for the final one, let's just do the same thing. Okay, now the saturation of those elements at the bottom are really good. Let's also go to the American flag. I think we can adjust the saturation of these elements as well. You can clearly see that we need to adjust some of these tones. These white stripes are quite prominent, so we are going to adjust the color of those. Let's close this group, go into American flag containers and do the same thing, guys. Hue and saturation, clip it to the image. This one is at the top. And what I think we're adjusting right now are the red lines or blue lines. Yep, I think it's the red lines, yep. And we are going to do the same thing. Drag until it matches with the scene. We can also do the same right here. Looking really nice. And what we can do probably is just go ahead and copy this into all of the other layers. Simply just copy this adjustment layer and clip it to the other flags. It's a quicker way of doing it, in my opinion. No, not in my opinion, a fact. It's a quicker way of doing it. Okay, looking really nice. Let's move to the Chinese flag right here in the top right corner. Let's go ahead and create a hue and saturation adjustment layer, clip it to the image, and do the same thing. Also for the stars as well. Maybe we can do a bit more. Yep, that's looking good. Let's go ahead and just do the same thing now, guys, for the American flag. Let's go ahead and just create a hue and saturation adjustment layer and adjust these stripes, these red stripes. Yeah, looking really nice. Okay, now the things that stand out to me right now, maybe we need to adjust the tariff tape a bit more. So let's go back to the tariff tape and just adjust the saturation. Yep, so that's -74. So what I'll do is just go to the other tariff tape, wherever that is. Yep, here. And yep, we can just do the same thing, just bring it down a slight bit. Okay. Now, of course, the flags within the tariff tape need adjusting as well, the reds. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's work on the one at the back. These elements. And so I hope you guys are learning new things. That's the whole point of this course, guys. I wanted to teach more advanced things than what you'd find on my YouTube channel. These things take much longer for me to teach on YouTube, and I can't go into as much depth for just a 20 to 30 minute YouTube tutorial. I can really go in depth like this, and I hope you guys are enjoying what I'm teaching you. Okay, let's go to the tariff tape at the front and adjust the stripes saturation. Same for the stars as well. Yep, looking really good. Okay, now the only things left, in my opinion, are just Donald Trump, his face, his tie as well, right here, his hand as well. Of course, Donald Trump has a very vibrant orange tone, so he's got a lot of saturation in him. And we need to remove some of that just to make him match with the scene. Okay, and we can do the same for President Xi. We could just lower the saturation of his face a slight bit more. Let's click on the Donald Trump group and go ahead and create a hue and saturation adjustment layer like so. Let's place this at the very top and make sure it's clipped to the subject. Okay, now let's go ahead and adjust the saturation. Let's just zoom into his face, and the areas which are brighter, let's just tone those down. Within reason, guys. Like I mentioned, you don't have to be perfect with this step. Just try and do it to a reasonable standard without overdoing it and making it black. We don't want to do that. Okay, looking good. Let's go into the hand. I think we can do some work here. Let's just zoom out actually, because I want to see if this affects the face. Let's click and drag. Yep, this is actually targeting a lot of the saturation. So let's just bring this down like so. Okay, looking good. Let's focus on the tie. So click on the tie and drag. Yep, that's also targeting a lot of the saturation on the subject as well. Yep. And let's just zoom out to get a better view. Yep, we're doing a good job. Now you can see right here on Donald Trump's jacket, we can decrease the saturation of this. So let's go ahead and do that. Maybe to something like this. This is before and this is after. Maybe a little bit more. Okay. Yep, to something like this. Okay, so this is before and this is after. So let's just take this off for a moment to see how much we've actually done to the subject. Yep, we've decreased the saturation quite a bit. Let's just zoom in. I don't want to actually make the face really dark. A lot of the saturation from other parts that we didn't select have actually been affected. So let's go ahead and just remedy that simply by just selecting a point which is quite dark and bringing the tones up a slight bit. Like so. Maybe the hair, we can bring a bit more saturation back in. Nope, let's leave it to that. I think we've done a pretty good job here. Okay, let's move on to President Xi. Go ahead and create a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And make sure it's clipped to the subject. And let's go ahead and do the same thing. Try and adjust as best as you can. Yep, so that's before, that's after. Yep, a tiny bit more. Okay, looking pretty good. Maybe this tie as well. That's affecting a lot of the skin tones in his face as well, so let's be careful. Yep, I think this is pretty good. Yep, everything looks blended in on this check layer, so we're in the right place. Okay. The tariff tape, we could probably decrease the saturation even further, but I don't want to undersaturate the tariff tape since of course we want some of that yellow to shine through in the thumbnail. Okay, this is looking really nice. Let's go ahead and remove our selective color layer, and now as you can see the colors are a lot more balanced. There is no element in this thumbnail which is really standing out amongst the others. This is what we wanted to do and we have done a very good job. Okay guys, now it's time to adjust the colors. Now when I say colors, what I'm basically saying is that we want to make this scene look real. So for example, if Donald Trump and President Xi were in this actual scene right now, then the light from the sky would be shining on them. And the same can be said for all of the other elements in this thumbnail. Now of course there are some decorative elements such as this war icon and also the text. We are going to exclude those elements, but for everything else within the scene, we need to add a bit of a purplish / blue tint to make this scene look real. So the ambient lighting, which is essentially just the color of the lighting in the natural sky, this will be shining on all of the elements like so. So the tariff tape, the containers, everything guys will have a bit of a tint of that color in the sky. That's going to make it a lot more realistic. And so let's go ahead and get started. Now we're going to be using color balance for this step, so we're basically going to be using a color balance adjustment layer. So let's go ahead and start off, let's say with Donald Trump. That would be a good place to start. So what we are going to do is make sure you have selected Donald Trump and then create a color balance adjustment layer like so, and then clip it to the image like so. Okay, now guys, what we are going to do is just focus on the shadows, midtones and highlights and adjust all of the colors. So the objective here is just to give a bit of a bluish / purplish tint to Donald Trump. So let's start off with the midtones. So add a tiny bit of red, add some magenta, and I think add a bit of blue as well. As you can see, it's sort of blending into the scene and it looks a little more realistic than before. So this is before and this is after. You can see that tint on Donald Trump. It just makes him look like he's within that environment. Okay, which is what we want. Before and after, night and day difference, but it's only a subtle difference. Let's do the same for the shadows and highlights. So a bit of reds, maybe +2, a tiny bit of magentas, maybe -1. Very subtle guys, you don't need to overdo it with this step. And we are going to add some blues in as well. Okay, I think +4 will do the trick. Okay, let's go into highlights and do the same thing. Tiny bit of red, not too much, a bit of magenta, and some blues as well. Let's take this to +6. Yep. Okay, so this is before and this is after. Looking really nice. Maybe we can just reduce the reds of the highlights a bit more. Just keep it to 0 for the highlights, the reds. Yeah, that's looking really good. Looking really nice. Now we are going to do the same thing for all the other elements in this thumbnail, besides of course the war icon and text. Okay, let's move on to the flag in the top left corner, the American flag. Let's go ahead and select that and create a color balance adjustment layer and clip it to the image like so. And let's just do the same thing, guys. So let's adjust the reds, +2, a bit of magentas. And there is no certain number you need to reach. There's no sort of value that is going to be right every time. You will need to just use your eye and just match the color of the flag to the color of the environment, the sky in the background. Okay, and that's all I'm looking at, guys, when I am adjusting the colors. I am not going by what we did for Donald Trump. I'm simply looking at the sky and just doing the same thing. Now, of course, it will be somewhat similar, but it's not exactly the same as what we did for Donald Trump. Yep, so just adding a bit of blue. Let's move into the shadows, do the same thing. Okay, let's leave the reds. I think there's enough red with the stripes. Let's just add a bit of magenta. Yep, tiny bit, not too much. Let's take this to -3 and add a bit of blue as well. Yep, looking nice. +8 does the trick. And let's see, I think we didn't do highlights yet. Let's go ahead and do the highlights. I think we can add a bit of red here, maybe +3. Adjust the, no, we'll keep the magentas to 0. We'll just not adjust any of these colors right here. And let's add some blues in as well. Okay, so I'm going to add +10 for blue. So if we toggle between this one, this is before and this is after. So you get the gist of what I'm trying to do here, guys. Every element within this thumbnail in the background, we are just trying to add some light to it as if it was in this scene. I think we can actually decrease the blues a bit. It's too much, maybe to, let's just keep it to +2. That's more than enough, and we can always come back to it afterwards. So once you've added your color balance adjustment layer to all of the elements, just have a look and see what things you can adjust. So there's no right or wrong in this phase, just try and match the general color. Okay, so let's move on to the container on the left. So let's go ahead and open up that group, add a color balance adjustment layer and clip to this image. Okay, and do the same thing, add a bit of reds, +3, bit of magenta, -3, and a bit of blue. Yeah, +7. Let's go into shadows, tiny bit of reds, maybe +2, bit of magenta, very subtle, -2, and a bit of blues. Take this to +10. Yep, that looks much better. And let's do the highlights. So we are going to add a bit more reds. Yeah, maybe to +3 magentas. Yeah, we can do this to -5 or -6. Not too bad. And add some blue as well. Yeah, +12 will do the trick. And as you can see, again, we have done the same thing. Okay, now for the containers on the right, of course, I'm just going to copy and paste this color balance layer since they are completely identical. So I don't want the settings to be different on both sides. So let's just paste this in and then just clip it to the container on the right. Okay, looking good. Let's now move on to the tariff tape. Let's select that. I'm going to close these groups. Right here, just quickly close the groups that are open. Yeah, this one. Okay, and this one. Okay, let's move on to the tariff tape. Tariff tape, and go ahead and add a color balance and do the same thing. This one is adjusting the one at the front. Okay, so let's add some reds, +3, add some magentas, -3, and add some blues. Yep, let's take this to +10. Looking good. Let's go into the shadows and just do the same thing, guys. Add some reds, bit of magenta, -2, and blues. +10. Yeah, +10 for shadows as well. And go into the highlights. Add some reds, +4, magentas, -4, and some blues as well to top it off. Let's take this to +13. Yep, and as you can see, we've added a blue/purplish tint to the yellow. Okay, looking good. Let's copy this to the tariff tape at the back, right here, paste it in, and then go ahead and clip it to the image. Okay, looking nice. So that's before, that's after. Before and after. Yeah, looking really nice. Let's just have a quick zoom out. Yeah, we have to do the Chinese flag as well, and the subject on the right. I haven't done that as well, so let's start off with the Chinese flag. So create a color balance layer, go ahead and clip it to the image, and let's adjust this Chinese flag. Now there's of course a lot of red in the flag, so we don't need to add any red into this flag. We need to add magentas. So let's just add a bit of magentas, -7 will do the trick, and add some blues as well. That's the main part that's going to really add that purplish tint to this flag. So let's just do that, +9 for the blue. Okay, let's move into shadows. We are going to ignore red, and if we adjust the cyans actually does a good job of blending this in. Let's add a bit of cyans in, -7, and a bit of blue, +7. I think we can adjust, we can keep the magentas as is. Yep, that's looking good. And I just want to go into the highlights now and add a bit more cyans into this image. Okay, let's see. Yep, -6, and blues as well. Take the blues to +10, and let's see if we can adjust the magentas. Yep, let's take the magentas to -4 for the highlights. So this is before and this is after. Looks pretty blended in to me. Maybe there's a little bit too much blue. So let's just take this down a bit to +3. And the same for the shadows. Let's just take down the blue a slight bit to maybe +3. Okay. Before and after. Yeah, just a bluish tint added to the flag. Looking really nice. Let's do the same thing for President Xi. So let's go ahead and create a color balance, clip it to the image and adjust. So we can definitely add a bit of reds into his skin. So +7, add some magentas, -6, and some blues. +4. Let's go into the shadows. Add some reds, +4. I'm trying to sort of match his skin tone with his one, just because it looks better. Like that, maybe we can take this to +3. Add some magentas, but not too much, -2, and add some blues as well. Yep, that's doing a very good job. The blues, as you can see now, it's starting to blend him into the scene. So +6. Yep, looking good. Maybe we can go into the highlights. I'm going to keep the reds the same. I don't want to oversaturate his face. Let's just add a bit of magenta, -2, and some more blues. Yep, maybe 2 + 10. So this is before, yeah. Now I think his face is slightly too red. Let's go back into the midtones and just bring down the reds a slight bit to maybe +3. Let's keep it subtle here, guys. Yep, looking much better. Now, guys, we also forgot to adjust the colors of the flags on the containers. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start off with the ones on the containers on the right for the Chinese ones. So let's go ahead and click on container. Nope, actually Chinese flag containers. And go ahead and just add our color balance layer to one of the flags, and then we can just copy and paste it to the other layers. Okay, so let's just add a color balance layer and just do what we've always done. So no need to add some reds, but we can add a bit of cyan in. So this is the bottom one we're focusing on first. Yep, -7, add a bit of magenta, -8, and add some blues in. +15. Let's go into shadows. Let's adjust. Let's add a bit of cyan. -2. A bit of magenta. When I say a bit, I mean -13. It's quite a lot. And let's add some blues in as well. Okay, 2 + 6. And let's just do the same thing one more time before the highlights. So let's add in a bit of cyan, -4, some magentas, -8, and add some blues in, 2 + 4. Okay, looking good. And let's go ahead and just paste this in a few times. So copy and paste it to the other flags. Add a clipping mask, like so. And just do the same thing a couple more times, guys. Okay, so let's copy it one more time and add it to the final flag. And just reclip these back to the layer. Okay, looking really nice. Let's do the same thing for the American flags. So let's just close this one. Go into the American flag containers and let's just do the same thing. Add a color balance adjustment layer and clip it to the image. And let's adjust. Yeah, we are focusing on the one at the top right now. So let's add a bit of cyans, -6, bit of magentas, -10, and some blues, 2 + 8. Go into shadows. Yep, I think we can actually add some reds in here. So let's add it 2 + 10. Add a bit of magentas and add some blues. And guys, if you're wondering how I know where to adjust these sliders to, this is simply just practice. Just adjusting colors and playing around with color balance, you're going to start to get a feel for what you need to adjust and how much you actually need to adjust. It's really just practice. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do the highlights. Okay, let's not add in any cyans, as you can see that's having a direct effect on the white lines right here. So let's not adjust the cyans for the highlights. Just add a bit of red. And I'm going to stay away from the highlights, guys. Okay, let's go ahead now and just copy this in to all of the American flags and clip it to the images. Where is the other one? Yep, right here. Copy and paste. So let's copy and paste that in and clip it to the image. Okay, looking really nice. So we've went ahead and adjusted the colors of all of the elements to match with the scene. What we're now going to do is focus on the lighting. So for the lighting, what I'm going to do is first of all enhance this spotlight we have in the center. So let me go ahead and find that image. Let's have a look. Where is that? Maybe we can just click layer 2. Okay, that's why we couldn't find it. It wasn't named properly. So let's go ahead and just rename this to light. And this is in the sword group. Okay, so what we are going to do is simply just Command or Control J to duplicate that spotlight we created earlier. And I want to go ahead and press Command or Control T to transform. And I'm just going to increase the size of it to something like this. Okay, something like this, and then let's just change the opacity all the way down to 0 and then gradually go up and see how much we can actually add without ruining the whole look of the thumbnail. Maybe we can add a bit more light, something like 35%. I think this looks good. Yep, looking pretty good. And now guys, what we are going to do is add a bit of light to the subjects and other elements in this thumbnail, just to show as if this light is shining on these elements. So the way in which we're going to add in our light is simply by just selecting these elements. Like let's start off with Donald Trump, and as you can see we created a curves layer which was called adjusting the brightness values of the image. So we are going to work within this layer mask. Simply click within the layer mask like so, press B for the brush tool and have the black color selected like so. This is going to conceal the effect we added on earlier, meaning that the brightness is actually going to go up, because remember we took the brightness down initially. And remember, with layer masks the black color conceals and the white color reveals. So by painting in black we are actually just revealing what was there previously. Okay, so go ahead and just press B for the brush tool, have the color set to black, and we are going to keep the flow to something like 20, which is not too low but not too high. And then let's just zoom in like so to the subject's face and let's start painting in some light. Yep, as you can see, just adding some light. And of course we are trying to paint light in the front side of his face, just to show that this is the source of light right here in the center, and this is shining on his face. So of course we are going to avoid the regions at the back. Okay, so let's go ahead and just paint some light where it should be. So some here, some on his jacket like so, some on his hand. And since we have the flow set to 20%, of course, if you go over it a couple of times, you can increase the strength of the light. As you can see right here, if I just keep rubbing over it, it increases the lightness value. Okay, so let's just undo that and paint some light. It doesn't have to be exaggerated, just simply adding in some light can really make a thumbnail look more realistic and more three-dimensional. So let's just go ahead, let's take the flow down to 10%, and I'm just now going to increase the size of the brush to something like this, and just paint a bit more light right here, like so. Yeah, looking pretty good. Yeah, this is looking nice, really nice. Yep. And let's just continue on. Maybe we can paint a bit of light down here. So let's just take this up to 20% again, 20%. And let's just add some light over here, maybe a bit here. Yeah, just a bit here, not too much, just a bit of light. Okay, I think this is pretty good. Yep, this is looking really nice. Okay, let's move on to President Xi and do the same thing. Zoom in. We are going to work within the curves layer for President Xi, and we are going to do the same thing with 20% flow. Let's go ahead and start adding in some light to his face. So let's target the edges of the face first. Just paint some light. Some on the hair, maybe some on the jacket as well. Undo that. Yeah, not too bad. If we just zoom out, yep, looking good. And to learn how to paint light, it's all with practice. Like I mentioned before with color balance, if you just focus on practice, you're going to get much better than this. There's no magical tutorial on how to paint in light that after watching you're just going to become a professional at. You have to simply practice and you will get better. That's my best advice to you guys. So don't get deluded into believing you can become a pro in one day, because it certainly wasn't like that for me as well. It takes quite a while to get to a decent level, guys. Yep, I think we can add a bit more right here. Yep, this is looking pretty good. Yep, okay, now of course I don't want to target those behind regions right here, just to make it look a bit more three-dimensional. So I think we are done with President Xi as well. Maybe I can add a tiny bit right here on the shirt. And a bit right here as well, but not too much. Yep, this is looking nice. Okay, let's move on to the containers. So let's start off with the container on the left. Let's just open that up, close the other group, and let's now just work within the curves layer for the container on the left. So press B for the brush tool, and we are going to do the same thing, okay? Let's actually turn our flow back to 20%, zoom in, and just paint light based upon where the source of light is coming from. So we can target the top region, target the top regions like so. And again, like I mentioned, it's very subtle, but it makes a difference, guys. So of course we're going to ignore this side since this side isn't facing the light source. Let's add some on this red container right here. Yep. On these ones. And these little things that you do right now, this is how you actually blend a scene together. It's a lot of steps culminated into one. So let's continue on. Let's blend this in a bit better. Yep. Looking nice. More focus needs to be put on these ones right here. Of course, since the text is blocking the containers at the back. This is looking nice, guys. Okay, looking pretty good. This is before, and this is after Yeah, as you can see, it's much more realistic and blended in with the actual environment. Okay, now let's have the same effect applied to the containers on the right. So what I'm simply going to do is copy this layer mask. So just press copy, so Command or Control C, and let's just paste this in to the containers on the right. Okay, so let's just paste this in at the very bottom right in replacement of this curves layer right here. We can remove the previous one like so, and then just make sure everything is clipped to the image once again. Okay, like this. Now, of course, the light was painted on this side with the layer mask. So when we duplicate that, of course, the light is still only on this side. So what we need to do is select within the layer mask, press Command or Control T like so. And as you can see, this is the location of where we painted in the light, irrespective of whether or not we've clipped it to the containers on the right. So we need to go ahead and right click, flip horizontal like so, and then let's drag like so. And if you hold down shift whilst dragging, you will keep it in the same position, and you can pretty much see where the light starts from. Of course, we are just looking at this corner right here. So it was to something like this. And this is just a shortcut if you don't want to go ahead and paint the light again manually. This just saves you a bit of time. Okay, let's try and get this in the right position. Exactly. Yep, I think this is how it was before. Just toggle between before and after. Yep, this is pretty good. Okay, so we've added light to both of these containers. What I'm now going to do is close these groups, and let's just add some bit of light to the tariff tape. So let's just open up tariff tape front, go ahead and work within the curves layer. Let's press B for the brush tool and zoom in. And I'm just going to paint a little bit of light on this, not too much. Maybe some here. Again, not too much. Maybe some here. Not too much, guys. Yep, that's looking pretty good. Let's do the back as well. So let's go on the tariff tape at the back, click within the curves layer, and let's just do the same right here. Add some light. Yep, looking really nice. Yep, that's looking pretty good to me, guys. Okay, now we're nearly done, guys. All I want to do now is just add a bit of shadows to this thumbnail just to enhance the realistic effect even further. So what I'm going to do is just add some curves layers to some elements where I actually need them to be, just to add in some manual shadows. So what I'll do is first I'll start off with the obvious one for me, which is the containers. So let's start off with the containers on the left, like so. Go ahead and create a new curves adjustment layer. Like so, clip it to the image, and we are going to just take the brightness of this down to something like this. Okay, let's press Command or Control I to conceal that effect. And now I'm just going to simply zoom in like so, and with the white color selected, we are going to just paint in some shadows on this region. Of course, since the light is not shining on these containers right here on this side, it would make sense that we add in some shadows just to make it look more realistic. Okay, so have the flow set to 20%. And let's just paint in some shadows on this side. Also, just change the blend mode to luminosity just to avoid changing the colors. Okay, so we're just affecting the brightness values, not the colors. Yep, we do it on these ones right here. Yep, looking really nice. Let's see if we can get a better blending mode, maybe darken. Yep, that's looking pretty good, actually. Looking really nice. If I just toggle between before and after, yeah, that's looking nice. Yep, let's keep that. Darken is actually better. And what I'm going to do is just lower the opacity as a way to just settle down that effect. So maybe let's do 75%. Yep, that's looking pretty good. Yep, let's do the same for this side very quickly. Let's just go ahead and copy this curves layer, paste it within the containers on the right layer, and just go ahead and clip this to the image. And then actually remove everything from this layer mask. So Command or Control A and backspace. And now with a blank layer mask, let's just paint in some light once again. Okay, so just painting in some lights on these regions right here. Looking really good. Yep, looks really nice. Much more three-dimensional in my opinion. Now we can also add some shadows to Donald Trump. So let's open up Donald Trump right here. Go ahead and create a curves layer and clip it to the image. Bring the brightness down and then just invert this mask. Command or Control I to invert the mask. And let's now do the same thing. Paint in some shadows. Now I'm going to take the flow down to 10% for this step because I want to have a lot of control with how much shadows I actually add in. So we just want this region right here to have some shadows. Yep, looking nice. Yep, looking really nice. Let's get the bottom right here. So now if we just toggle between before and after, as you can see, we've just added a bit more shadows to the subject just to make it look a little more realistic. Let's do the same for President Xi. Go ahead and add a curves layer. Clip it, bring down the brightness. And do the same thing, guys. Once you've inverted it, yep, let's just paint in some shadows right here. Especially in a scene this dark, these shadows would definitely be more prominent, and that's what we're trying to fix here, guys. As I'm sure you can pretty much see, it's much more realistic than when we first started off. It's looking like a real scene. Okay, looking good, looking really good. So let's go ahead and merge all of our layers in our layer section into one layer simply by pressing Command, Option, Shift and E, and that's going to merge all of our layers into one layer. Okay, and from here, let's go ahead and right click, convert to smart object, and let's click on filter and camera raw filter, and let's now elevate this thumbnail to the next level. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit. Let's start off in the light section, and of course the first thing I want to do is just increase the overall exposure of this thumbnail. Of course this is a thumbnail, so we need things to be visible. If it was a piece of art, we could probably keep it to a much more darker tone, but we need people to see what's going on in the thumbnail, and so we're going to increase the exposure because of that. So let's go ahead and increase the exposure and take it up to something like 0.5. Yeah, that looks pretty good for now. We can adjust this afterwards. And let's move on to contrast and add a bit of contrast. Yeah, that looks really nice. Let's take this up to +12. Yeah, looking really nice. Let's add some highlights. Nope, let's just keep the highlights at 0. I'm going to increase the whites a slight bit more. Yeah, that looks nice, to +30, and do the opposite. We are going to increase the blacks. So let's just introduce some more blacks. So I think -10. I think -11 does a good job here. Okay, let's move into the colors tab. Let's try and adjust the temperature. Maybe add a slight blue tint to the overall scene. Let's see if that is possible. And more than possible if it actually looks good. Okay, so we're adding a bit of blue. I think we can get away with it. Maybe we can actually take this down just to maybe -2. A very slight amount of blue added to the scene. It looks really nice. Okay, let's add some vibrance. So let's take this up to +15 and increase the saturation as well. Let's take this up to +10. So this is before, this is after. No, +10 is a bit too much. Let's take this to +5. And just increase the vibrance to +20. I think that's enough color in the scene. Let's go into effects. Let's increase the texture. Let's take this up to +25. Let's increase the clarity as well. Yep, that's doing a very good job. Let's increase the clarity to +10. And just zoom in. Yep, +10 works well. Let's add a bit of a vignette as well. Like so. Yep, that's looking really nice. And what we can actually do is click on this arrow to open up more options, and let's just adjust these settings even further. So what I'm going to do is just take the feather all the way down first and foremost, and just increase the strength of the vignette so I can see this outline border we have right here, and I can actually see what I'm adjusting. Okay, let's adjust the roundness. maybe to something like this, and then slowly introduce the feather back in, like so, and then just decrease the strength of the vignette. Yeah, I think this is pretty good, looking nice. Let's just toggle between all of these effects, before and after. Yep, looking very nice. Let's go ahead and close this tab and add a bit of grain and see if that does any good. So just add a bit of grain. I think 12 grain does a pretty good job. Let's keep it to 12. Let's go into curve and see if there's any adjustments we can make here. I'm going to click on the blue color to edit the blue channel, and let's go ahead and just increase the highlights of the darker areas. Just give a bit of a blue tint. Maybe take this up, maybe by just 1 or 2 points, and do the same for the highlights as well. To maybe, yep, 1 or 2 points, not too many. That's 2 points. Let's just toggle between before and after. Yep, just adding a bit more of a blue tint, looking nice. Let's go into detail. Let's increase the sharpening and take this up to 30. Yeah, that's looking good. 30 sharpening, and then let's just toggle between before and after. Actually, I think sharpening is actually ruining the detail of the thumbnail simply because of these fine lines on the containers. If you can see, if I increase the sharpening even further, it's really starting to brighten the containers even further, as you can see right here. So what I'll do is actually just take the sharpening up to a subtle 15. Yep, I think that's a little better than before. Yep. Much better. Let's keep it to 15. And now guys, let's just have a look at the exposure and see if we actually need to increase it a little more. I think we can just take this up a slight bit more, maybe to 0.55. Yeah, but just adding a bit more light to the thumbnail. Let's click OK and have a look at the thumbnail and get a first glance, a first opinion of what we can adjust. I think we can add a bit more of a manual vignette to this thumbnail. So what I'm going to do is create a layer at the very top, like so. Press B for the brush tool, increase the size of the brush, and let's just set the color to black. Let's also go ahead and change the blending mode to luminosity, and this is simply just going to prevent us from affecting the colors when we go ahead and add in a bit of shadows to the final thumbnail. Okay, so let's just increase the size of our brush to something like this. Let's have our flow set to 10%. Like so, and let's just add some shadows to the corners of this thumbnail, maybe at the bottom as well, like so. Yep, I just think this draws the focus more to the center of the thumbnail, so just adding a bit of shadows to the edges, as you can see. This is before, and this is after. Yep, this is looking much better, and I'm sure you guys would agree. Let's just adjust the opacity to 80% so that we're not overdoing it. This is before and this is after. Yep, this looks really good. Okay, I think we can just boost the saturation and vibrance ever so slightly, just a bit more. Let's go back into camera raw filter and then go ahead and just do that. So let's go ahead and select color, and let's just increase the vibrance to 25 and increase the saturation to +8. Yep, I think that looks a little better. Maybe we can take the saturation to +10. Yep, this looks much better. And there you have it guys, the trade war thumbnail. Now it took us quite a while to get to the end, but I hope you learned many different things within this tutorial. Like I mentioned before, the objective with this thumbnail was to help teach you how to blend images together into a scene like this one. And of course, this is thumbnail design, and we have adhered to good thumbnail design principles. As you can see with the large text, we also created tension within the scene with a dark background, and also having these two facing off with Donald Trump pointing towards President Xi. We've also provided visual context within this thumbnail with the tariff tape and the flags from both countries on the containers. This is all visual context helping in communicating the message of the thumbnail, which is that there is a trade war going on between the two countries. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.